Call to order the regular meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council of March 24th, 2026. As we begin here, I believe there's a request to amend our agenda, and I'll entertain that motion.
I would like to move, I move to amend the March 24th, 2026 regular meeting agenda to add discussion of the NCDOT letter regarding the proposed redesign of the Pinehurst traffic circle as item number 8.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. One other thing before we get on to the invocation and the pledge. Member Fitzpatrick isn't with us tonight because he had planned a trip long before he got elected to the village council, and this is where it fell. So he's not here, but that's fine. So now let us go on to the, as we traditionally do, we'll have an invocation from Katie Horster, who's joined us before, Associate Pastor from the Pinehurst United Methodist Church. Katie, please.
Thank you. Let's pray. God, we give you thanks for this day and this community. We pray for the council gathered here in service to our community today. We pray for wisdom and discernment in all the ways that it's needed. We pray for all the members of our community. We pray for listening ears and open hearts and wisdom as we discuss the matters we have before us today. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And now we were making a little adjustment to the traditional Pledge of Allegiance. As you know, for the last 2 years, the Pledge of Allegiance has usually been led by a youngster, as young as 6 at one time, and it's been great. But there's a point where we've gotten through most of our youngsters in this community that are available to come through us. So given the recent adoption of the Senior Advisory Committee, we thought we would turn the pledge over to some members of the more mature members of our community. So tonight, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance will be Miss Helen Neal. She's a native of North Carolina. She's lived in Pinehurst for over 30 years. And she's a young 92. Ms. Helen, if you'll please lead us, and if everyone will rise, face the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Helen. We appreciate that very much. And now, as is our tradition, we'll go on to reports, and we'll begin with the village manager. Doug Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have this upcoming Saturday is our Easter egg hunt in Cannon Park. So that kicks off at 10:30 and will go to 12:30. It's one of our most well-attended events. So if you are interested in a little egg full of candy, you are welcome to attend. Also, we have initiated a new library outlook on the website. So on our website, you can go and see updates of the construction. We'll have pictures. We'll have a little bit of explanation on what's going on, and we encourage everyone to stay involved in that process and visit the main page of the website. And then last of all, I want to make a quick message about golf cart safety as it's getting a little warm out, minus today. It is not warm out today, but just a reminder of some few safety tips for your golf carts. So everyone should remember that you need to follow all the traffic laws in a golf cart. Also, you must have a driver's license to run a golf cart on a village road. And that we've all seen people with maybe small children that have not maybe adequately protected them. So I know you all love your children, so please make sure that they're safe in a golf cart. Sometimes I see a mom hanging on to a kid, and it's like, they're all going to fall out. So just be wise with that. And just a reminder that golf carts don't have the same protections as vehicles. So just remember that when driving around. And we're going to push this across our website, social media, the NAC, just trying to remind everyone that they need to be safe while they're using those out on our roads. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that reminder, Doug. I have a few items. One, I just left the Pinehurst Harness Track in Fair Barn area with my colleagues, Barbara Ficklin and Jeremy Hoop were there, and a plaque honoring the racetrack and the Fair Barn and all was unveiled there, thanks to the Pinehurst Beautification Committee, who has been in the forefront of this. We now have 3 of these plaques. They're very good-looking plaques around the town. And one was last summer in Warren Manning on the Village Green, and there's one about the solar eclipse on the corner of Ritter and Barrett Road. So it was a nice event, and congratulations to the Beautification Committee and to everybody else who's been involved with them in this effort to make sure our history is preserved here in this village. Secondly, I had the honor of walking in the St. Patrick's Day Parade about a week or so ago. I want to congratulate village staff for the smooth arrangements that went there, and we had a terrific turnout, and it's become obviously an annual event, and there was a lot of people wearing a lot of green. I also, this past week, had the pleasure of meeting the Commissioner of Labor for the state of North Carolina, Mr. Commissioner Farley, and Doug also met him for a bit. And though we don't have a lot of interaction, it's nice to know some of these officials. You never know when you need to call the Commissioner of Labor. So we have a friend there. Lastly, I wanted to, or 2 items. One, I wanted to mention coming up before our next council meeting is the matinee harness races, the spring ones that are being held at the Pinehurst Harness Track. And it's quite a big event. Lots of people go there and tailgate and watch some of the harness race that'll take place. So if you haven't looked into it yet, you can go to our website, and there's a lot of activities and information about the Saturday, April 11th event. And finally, I did stumble on our website something that I didn't really know specifically, and I want to share it with everybody because it's a great thing. It's called a Village of Honor project. If you go to our website, all those wonderful flags that line our streets for Memorial Day and Independence Day and September 11th and so on, each flag honors an active duty soldier or veteran, living or deceased. And those flags require some sponsors. And so if you have an interest in wanting to sponsor a flag, I think it's around $20 or so, you can go to the website, fill out a form, and let us know who it's in honor of, and there'll be a flag placed there on those events. So I encourage you to go to the village website and seek a Village of Honor. It's a very simple page, and you may want to be a participant that way. And that concludes my report. I'll turn to Mayor Pro Tem Taylor.
Yes, first of all, I apologize for having missed the marker unveiling. I had every intention of being there, but circumstances intervened. And I also want to pick up on something Doug said regarding golf carts. And when I think about how I grew up, nobody wore a helmet riding a bike, and we're all here. And there are lots of things in which the long arm of government has maybe enhanced safety, maybe intruded on individual rights, I don't know. I really want us to try to avoid having to do something because there was an adverse accident in a golf cart. And we can't, we have a limited amount of that we could do about that, but it's just common sense. These things can go 25 or 30 miles an hour. You're not nearly as well protected as you are in a vehicle. I don't know whether kids up to age 6 or whatever, a certain weight should have to be in a car seat or not. That's a different question. But they can't be in an open vehicle bouncing around, and you just never know. And you can't have your 13-year-old or your 14-year-old driving one from your house into the village. They haven't taken driver's training. They don't understand how traffic situations evolve and how another driver might do something they don't anticipate that is not even legal. So I really hope that people who own golf carts, and whether they're children or grandchildren, whatever, will think about that and try to be sure that they're operated safely so that we don't have a bad situation. An ounce of prevention is definitely worth a pound of cure. The one main meeting that I attended was a week ago tonight. The Moore County Board of Commissioners had on their agenda a proposal in support of the current traffic circle redesign. And I wanted to go up and hear what the debate was there, and also be prepared, which I ultimately did to speak. And when I spoke, a couple of things seemed to be the case, which were that they didn't seem to understand how many different scenarios the Department of Transportation have studied, and there were other scenarios out there. In any event, we'll have more to say about that later in the agenda here. I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder on the golf carts. Jeremy Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 points as well. You know, I with John attended the Moore County Commissioners meeting where they adopted their support for the current DOT design circle. I as well spoke against that decision to support that design. And again, we'll speak more about that later. Also attended the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Speaking of golf carts, me and my family, my little girl, she really wanted to decorate a golf cart, so we put one in the parade this year. It was very, very well ran. Thank you to Doug and our Parks and Rec staff. And it was very notable that there were some decisions and some safety steps taken just to keep us all safe along that route. And I think there's been some increased, barriers and solid barriers and everything. So thank you to that. It was noticed by us. Thank you for keeping us safe. And I'll just chime in on the golf cart as well. I love scooting through the village. So does my family. So does my little 9-year-old. And we cross Highway 5. So I see every day or constantly how one bad decision can really hurt. So I'll chime in with that as well. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have one thing that.
Go right ahead.
A number of friends of mine have fallen, and this is more in the cybersecurity awareness area. A number of friends of mine have, I don't want to say whether their emails have been hacked, but there is a phishing scam going around where someone will send you something that looks like a party invitation. And the headline is usually, "I hope you can attend," something like that. I'm not saying that there aren't people legitimately sending out party invitations. That certainly is possible. But there are a large number where this is a phishing scam. So just be alert to it. Ask yourself if it's likely that the person sending it to, who in all probability you do know, would be sending out something this way. So
Sure, the one party I get invited to.
Okay.
Good way.
Good reminder. All right. Councilwoman Ficklin.
Thank you. Well, I too attended the St. Patrick's Day Parade. It was a lot of fun. It was well attended, and that is an event that is co-sponsored between Parks and Rec and also Pinehurst Business Partners. Speaking of Pinehurst Business Partners, they had a business after-hours meet and greet yesterday evening. It was at the Purple Thistle, which is now in Aberdeen, and it also was well attended. A couple of reminders coming up. Sand Hills Dog Fair on Saturday, April 11th, will be at the Arboretum. And in addition to that, the Village Heritage Foundation nominations for the Historic Plaque Program are due April 15th. Please go to their website for additional information on how to apply. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. Please do take Councilwoman Ficklin's advice. Please do apply for those plaques. All righty, that concludes the reports. We'll now move to item 4. This is a motion to approve the consent agenda. All items listed below are considered routine or have been discussed at length in previous meetings and will be enacted by one motion. No separate discussion will be held unless requested by a member of the village council. So we will be taking up approving the village council meeting minutes for March 10th, the regular meeting minutes, March 10th, the work session minutes, and March 10th, the closed session minutes. So I will entertain a motion there.
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, there's an item B on the consent agenda also, which deals with the FY26 budget amendments report as of March 19th. So we ought to address that also. Is there anybody have a question about that? This is rather routine. Is there, Doug, is there anything you'd like to mention about this?
It's a minor internal adjustment to deal with the HVAC unit in our server room.
Okay. I've seen it. It sounds very reasonable. So we'll need a separate motion for that.
Is this an unexpected repair, and obviously we have to make a budgetary adjustment to cover that?
Yes.
I would move to approve the fiscal 2026 budget amendment report dated March 19th, 2026.
Okay. Motion?
Second?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion adopted. That ends the consent agenda. And now we will go to mayoral proclamation. So, let me get this in front of me. This deals with the Public Safety Telecommunications Week proclamation. So I will read this, and you'll understand why we're adopting this. Whereas public safety telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services, and whereas these dedicated professionals serve as the vital link between the community and emergency responders, ensuring that police, fire, and emergency medical services are dispatched quickly, efficiently, and accurately, and whereas the public safety telecommunicators handle emergency and non-emergency calls with professionalism, compassion, and calm under pressure, often providing life-saving instructions and reassurance to callers during times of crisis. And whereas the work performed by public safety telecommunicators requires extensive training, knowledge, and the ability to make rapid decisions that can impact the safety and well-being of the public and first responders alike. And whereas the safety of police officers, firefighters, emergency medical personnel, and the citizens they serve is greatly enhanced by the dedication and service of these highly skilled professionals. And whereas the second full week of April has been designated as National Public Safety Communicators Week to recognize the invaluable service provided by these communications specialists, I, as mayor of the village of Pinehurst, do hereby proclaim April 12th through 18th as Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in the village of Pinehurst, and encourage all residents to join in recognizing the critical role these professionals play in protecting our community. Thank you, and that is the proclamation we intend to issue. I want to thank everybody who works on these projects, our police and fire staff, folks in the communication area. We have I think, a very proud history of our ability to respond to what could be crises, or our ability to just be there to comfort folks in these times of little uncertainty. So I, again, proclaim it to all. Thank you. Doug,
Thank
you have
you.
something to add?
Just that the week of April 12th through 18th, Mayor, maybe we can get together and we can go deliver this to our dispatchers that are on duty that day.
Excellent. That's a
I'll
good
say
suggestion.
this is a very, very stressful job. You know, police and fire are also very stressful, but the dispatchers in particular, all day long they're hearing, you know, some of the worst things you could hear over the phone, and they don't actually ever get to see the end results and see if some of the things get worked out. And so the stress management is real, and it's very difficult for them. So we just want to recognize that they put a lot into their jobs, and they do a lot for our community and to keep us safe, and we really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, and great suggestion. We'll definitely figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
The item 6 I didn't mean to skip that. This is our public comments period. This is separate from the public hearing we're going to be going into, so if there are comments during that, we'll do that. We have one comment, and that's from Mr. Bob Coates on the topic of STRs. Mr. Coates, would you come forward and tell us where you live and speak into the microphone? And after he's through, no one else has signed up, but if somebody who's here would like to speak on any topic, they're welcome to come to the microphone also.
Bob Coates, Edinburgh Lane in Pinehurst. I hadn't planned on speaking tonight, so apologies if my comments seem somewhat disjointed. But when I read the village update on the SDRs, I felt the need to speak, but I'll be brief. I realize the public comments are not a dialogue between me and the council or anyone else, but I believe that STRs are going to be dealt with in a working session, so I thought I'd make my comments there, and if there were any responses, perhaps they could be made at that time. I was doing okay with reading the STR update paper until I got to the occupancy limits portion. In that, it acknowledges that several properties exceed the threshold limits, but because they had advertised this prior to the ordinance adoption, they are considered legal nonconformities and can therefore continue. Really? Laws change. People need to adapt. I used to drive 45 miles an hour on Midland Road. They lowered the speed limit to 35, and so I adapted. I think that just because we used to do something, we can't continue to do it if rules and regulations change. And the same should apply to STR occupancy limits. I'm sure that other North Carolina towns have adopted occupancy limits, and I think Pinehurst should do that as well. I think you realize I feel that Pinehurst is a great place to live, but we've had a history of non-enforcement of our rules and regulations. In the case of the STRs, we had the staff write a STR ordinance, and then they themselves declare it unenforceable. I've been looking for a word to both respectfully describe my frustration, but I can't do that, so I think this is just wrong. We should do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. Is there anybody else who has a topic they'd like to address? You can have, sure, come forward. State your name and address, please. Go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Peter Mamuzic. I live at Royal Oak, Royal County down in Pinehurst. Comment on the paper articles that were recently published in WRAL stating that DOT has a new plan. I would urge the council as well as the DOT to re-examine it again. I believe the current circle needs a couple tune-up points between now and 2031. Whatever happens in 2031, be that as it may. Right now, I think we need to post a speed limit within the circle of 25 miles an hour. And at the same time, reduce speed of all incoming roads to 35 miles an hour. I believe it is insane for anybody to believe that the circle can work when you're feeding it with 5 tributaries coming in, double lane tributaries at 55 miles an hour. You know, it's posted 45, nobody goes 45 on 211 or 15501. So you're feeding it at a tremendous rate of cars and feeding it all down to 1 lane in the circle. it's never going to work. So lower that speed limit coming into the circle and reduce the circle speed limit to 25 so that people can merge. Right now, if you see somebody speeding at you at 40 miles an hour, you just aren't going to merge, or you're going to start and chicken out. Number two, the lanes in the circle, the merging lanes are perfect if you're sailing in at 45 miles an hour and there is nobody in the circle. It's like entering a highway. You sail right through. But if you're in a stop-and-go traffic, and you stopped behind somebody, and you're looking to your left to see if there are any incoming cars, you can't see the car in front of you. So if they start and chicken out and stop, you will hit them. That accounts for 80% of the accidents that have been experienced in the circle. That's 80% you could eliminate by just changing the entrance angle or the merge angle in the circle from 30% to a 70, from 30 degrees to 70 degrees and flare that intersection. And number three, I think we've started well when installing bollards or lane separations on some parts. We need to have it on all 5 spokes to prevent folks from crossing and trying to beat the queue, if you will, and causing accidents. So those are the points I think we really need to examine between now and 2031. They're easy fixes, they're cheap fixes, and I think they'll improve our life between now and then. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will be discussing the circle a little bit. We amended our agenda to include that specific topic. All righty. Any other public comments? General? None? Okay. And that concludes the public comments period. And now we will go to item 7, which is a public hearing. This is a public hearing regarding Monticello Drive conditional zoning map amendment. The purpose of the hearing is to consider an official zoning map amendment for approximately 5.19 acres of land located along Monticello Drive and further identified by parcel ID number 000-19245. This proposed map amendment would zone the property from R30 medium density residential to R15 CD medium density residential conditional district to allow for the development of an 8-unit single-family development. The property owner is Halshan LLC, and the applicant is Mr. John Greenbacker.
Point of order?
Yes.
Should we enter the public meeting before staff comments, or?
Okay, yeah, we can take,
I think staff comments are part of the, so
go
I
ahead,
move
motion.
to enter the public hearing.
okay, motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are now in the public hearing, and we will hear from Alex Cameron from, heads of the Planning and Zoning Department, and then we will also hear from applicants and the public. Alex, go right ahead.
Well, Mayor, thank you for that introduction. Now that saves me a few seconds off my first slide. So again, to recap, it is a conditional zoning map amendment request for an unaddressed parcel off Monticello Drive, a little over 5 acres. The current zoning is R30, medium density residential, and it is vacant, currently undeveloped. And this proposal would be to conditionally rezone the property to R15, also defined as medium density residential, and that would allow for the proposed layout of an 8-lot major subdivision. I will attest that the public hearing was posted, the adjacent owners notified, and the hearing published as required by general statutes. As I typically do, I'll kind of do a rundown of the request itself, and then kind of conclude with what council's options are. So again, this is a conditional zoning map amendment. This is not conventional. It is a legislative decision process, which does require this public hearing. With conditional zoning map amendments, local governments and petitioners have the ability to assess site-specific development conditions, as well as a site-specific development plan, which we do require and is referred to as a general concept plan. With this particular proposal, and we'll have a slide that will follow this one that kind of shows that layout on that general concept plan, the petitioner is requesting a development condition to increase the rear setback in the R15 district from 30 feet to 50 feet. And they've indicated that is in order to increase separation between the proposed lots and the existing lots, specifically those that are zoned R210 in the Country Club of North Carolina neighborhood. And they're also requesting a condition to not provide sidewalks. The Pinehurst Development Ordinance, or the PDO, does require sidewalks on subdivisions that are service 8 lots or more on at least one side. They are also requesting a condition from the Engineering Standards and Specifications Manual, the ESSM, to not install curb and gutter, and instead provide a ditch section roadway to handle stormwater runoff. And for all streets and roads, per the Engineering Standards Manual, that do not have a curb and gutter, they are required to have a 60-foot right-of-way, and they are requesting to vary that due to the access the flag lot has off Monticello Drive, which is just under 60 feet, as you see, a little over 59. These requests also require a public hearing and recommendation by our Planning and Zoning Board. And anytime Village Council is considering such requests, you are to consider the adopted comprehensive plan for some guidance on the proposal. So here's a proposed 8-lot layout with the conditional zoning requests. Here's the access mentioned. And again, the term I used was a flag lot. It's an industry term for a lot that has a sort of skinnier or narrow access point to a right-of-way. And then as the lot deepens, it gets wider and expands. The lots are labeled on the general concept plan with an area for stormwater management and just one cul-de-sac bulb. A little bit more into the staff analysis. It is located within the village's corporate limits. Again, the site access being provided there just a little over 58 to 59 feet. Adjacent properties are a mix of residential and commercially zoned properties. Public water and sewer is available and provided by Moore County Public Utilities. The project area is not located within a watershed protection area. The site has no known floodplains, wetlands, or other environmental constraints. The topography on the property is a slope of about 20 feet, plus or minus max, from the southwest towards the northeast portion, which is the area where the stormwater management is proposed. And finally here, a neighborhood meeting was required, as they are for all conditional zoning requests, and the applicant provided that report.
Alex, when you say a slope, which is the northwest corner the high side?
The northeast would be the lower side, the southwest, the western portion would be the high side.
To the northwest portion.
It kind of, you can kind of see the contours here sloping down.
Down from left to right as we're
Correct.
looking at this. Thank you.
All right, a little bit more into the adjacent and surrounding areas. So here's a subject property again. It's a little bit further zoomed out extent. You can see the harness track property, which got a good recognition earlier today, and it's on public conservation. We have the neighborhood commercial zoned property here that has the assisted living center, the R10 zoned existing residential neighborhood to the north and a little bit to the east. And then the area here immediately surrounding to the east and to the south is all zoned R210 and part of the Country Club of North Carolina. The comprehensive plan gives a little bit of a guidance for how future land use considerations should be handled through the conservation and growth map. This area is, most of our area is shaded this gray, which is identified as suburban neighborhood. Both the existing zoning of R30 and the proposed zoning of R15 would be consistent with this designation. A few more areas of the comp plan that staff wanted to call attention to. Of course, Village Council can consider all pertinent parts that they deem prudent for considering these requests. But one in particular of our 7 guiding principles was guiding principle 2, balancing conservation and growth. It does say the village needs to balance the need to conserve land while allowing purposeful quality development in strategic locations. Implementation strategies 2.17 and 2.18 were also called out, and a lot of those talk about ensuring that existing zoning allows for desired scale of development and make sure any new areas that are identified for development does not permit undesirable patterns, and also that we should strive to improve the overall quality of new housing in the village where we can. The Planning and Zoning Board held a public hearing on November 6th of last year. During that hearing, the board did hear and they discussed items and concerns related to the proposed increase in density, which would come from the request from an R30 designation to an R15 designation, traffic and access, as well as compatibility with the existing established adjacent residential neighborhoods. After concluding the hearing, the board decided to unanimously recommend to Village Council denial of the request, and they found that it was not consistent with the comprehensive plan, citing the change in the density with the transition from R10 to R210. So again, that transition being here, the R10, they felt it was the underlying existing zoning designation of R30 provided a great transition to the less dense R210. All right, staff recommendation. The comprehensive plan gives some pretty subjective parameters for Village Council to consider. Nothing really helpful or definitive to point to say yes to this or no to that. However, it is your duty to review the comprehensive plan and adopt some sort of statement of consistency or inconsistency. Conduct this public hearing and receive additional public comment. Expect that you'll probably hear similar comments that the Planning and Zoning Board heard during their hearing. Consider any other additional comments that may be presented this evening during the hearing. So the Village Council has a handful of options, as they do with these conditional zoning map amendments. If there's something that is brought up today during the public hearing that the Village Council feels warrants continuing the public hearing to further suss out or address, you have that ability. If you do, we do ask, as is required, so we do not have to provide additional notice, if you would state that specific date, time, and place. If you choose to, after receiving the public comments and any presentation or additional material by staff or the applicant, you may close the public hearing. After the public hearing is closed, you have the ability to consider approving the zoning map amendment. Doing such would require adoption of an ordinance, so staff would ask that you direct us if you would consider adoption of the conditional zoning map amendment to put this on the next available agenda. We have a placeholder there for the 14th of April. You may decide to reject the proposal. You may defer the action to a later meeting. And you also, as always, have the option to refer the proposal back to Planning and Zoning Board. However, they have carefully thought out the proposal. When approving or rejecting any of these zoning map amendments, as I mentioned earlier, the Village Council does need to adopt a statement of consistency with the comprehensive plan, as well as provide a brief statement on why that justification is or is not reasonable and is or is not in the best interest of the public. So in summary here, we have a conditional zoning request from R30 to R15, would allow for an 8-lot single-family subdivision. They're requesting conditions to increase a rear setback, omit sidewalks and curb and gutter requirement, and a minor reduction in the 60-foot right-of-way width in the engineering standards manual. Consider it a comprehensive plan, along with the Planning and Zoning Board and special call-outs that the staff has provided in their recommendation. Of course, you got to conduct this public hearing. You may decide to continue it or close it this evening, and then later after that, you can consider action on the proposal. And that does conclude my presentation.
Okay. We have any questions for Alex?
Alex, let me just engage in a little bit of mathematics here. The lot is around 225,000 square feet. That's 5.19 times the size of an acre. And if I subtract out 30,000 for the stormwater management, leaves me 195. If it was maintained at R30, therefore, in theory, you could have 6 lots with the current zoning. Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, and I know we're not designing this to a specific, determining factor for this type of calculation, but similarly, what we have done before in looking at this if you just add up the developable area that you see on that plan, that layout, all the 8 lots, and if you divide that by 30,000, you're getting close to 5.5. So similar ballpark. So you're talking 5 or 6 lots under the current zoning, maybe, and this proposal has 8.
Right, so we're, in theory, the owner could propose to develop either 5 or 6 lots that would meet R30 zoning. There'd be no need for conditional rezoning. They could proceed consistent with other aspects of the planning process.
Sure, and if they met all those requirements, it would be an administrative decision.
Okay.
I've got a question, if that's okay.
No, I'm fine.
Okay,
I-
all right.
relax fine.
Just a couple of things. And you may have mentioned it, but I was looking for what specifically did planning and zoning say when rejecting the applicant in their meeting? What was their
So
motion?
their actions are recommendations, so it was not an act of, they don't make any acts of approval or rejection, but they did recommend that village council deny, finding that it was not consistent with the comprehensive plan because of the change in density, which therefore takes away that current structure of that variation and transition from the higher dense residential zoning of the R10 to the lower dense R2 to 10.
One other question. Can you recall any time in the past where a unanimous recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Board was overturned or changed by the council itself?
I can definitely think of a few where at least the majority, usually the Planning and Zoning Board is pretty much in lockstep unless it's a very controversial topic. So it's difficult for me to answer that with absolute certainty. But
Right.
There's been cases where the village council action does defer or differ from the Planning and Zoning Board recommendation.
I could recall
But
that.
this is the most recent memory that I can think of, that there was a unanimous recommendation to deny a request.
I recall one or two when it wasn't unanimous, as you said, there was some division. But I can't
believe
recall
there may have been a
unanimous
few
one.
about 8 to 9 or 10 years ago. I wasn't heavily involved in the application process, but obviously was in the room witnessing it, and they were fairly
Okay.
polarizing at times, yep.
Thanks. Jeremy, you looked like you had a question or two.
I did. It was answered. I was just asking clarity for the R30 and the by right opportunity that the applicant had, which was answered. Thank you.
Okay. Barbara? Nothing. Okay. I don't think we have any more questions for you. Please, of course, stand by. I think our next step is to call forward the applicant and applicants. And please just make sure your microphones are on, speak clearly, and introduce yourselves. Thank you. There you go. Green is on.
Hello, my name is John Greenbacker. I am the applicant. I'm here with Paul.
Yeah, I'm Paul Satoff with V3 Companies. We did the plan and the application for this.
Yes. And just to follow up on everything that was shared today, we did have the planning and zoning meeting, and it was unanimously shot down. I think that most of the concerns were with the adjacent property owners on Monticello Drive, and them feeling that it would be too much of an increase in the density. I would like to point out that R210, where it is on CCNC, you're lining, the end of my property lines it with a chain link fence and a barbed wire. So this transitioning idea to me, frankly, really does not make as much sense because this is only accessible through Monticello, and CCNC is kind of its own, what I would consider its own entity or island. Furthermore, if you look around, if you zoom out on the zoning map, all upon Monticello Drive, then if you go past Highway 5 as well, it's all zoned R10.
Excuse me, can we move this screen to the, that's the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even furthermore, if you were to go further down, get to the stoplight and cross, it's all zoned R10. And we're talking 0.3 lot lines, etc. I believe that having it currently zoned R30 doesn't really make sense because every other neighborhood around you has a 0.3 acre lot. And to address the issues or the concerns of the adjacent property owners in front of this property, as Alex mentioned, we increased the setback lines to 50 feet. Because the way it's currently zoned, I believe they could build something within 30 feet of the 30 feet. So we gave them almost doubled it. Just to be, in my mind, respectful of the adjacent property owners, give them more of a buffer. Because currently, you know, they walk out their backyard and they see woods. And I understand their feeling and not wanting to have that developed behind them. But as also mentioned today, it's currently zoned to have 5.5, maybe 6 lots. And this would only increase it 2 more lots. And it is definitely more consistent with the lot sizes of all of the surrounding neighborhoods. All the cul-de-sacs you see, etc. Furthermore, I'm not sure why this was zoned R30 to begin with. From the title work, I purchased this from a family that had owned it since the 1970s. I think 1970 is when he purchased it. So I don't know why it was zoned this way. I think it's probably because it slipped through the cracks. All of that property was owned by PCC, I believe, back in the 70s when they were trying to push and develop everything. And this guy just owned it. So I believe it slipped through the cracks, and I believe that's why it's not zoned R10. I don't have anything to support that. I've tried to do research. The adjacent property owners did as well. But that's just what I can only speculate. I don't think there's really more for me to add right now.
No, I'm thinking about the planning board, some of their comments, I think there was some confusion about the right-of-way width coming off of Monticello, that flag portion, and that it was too narrow. It was designed to be an access point. You can see how it's designed. It is, you know, 0.2 feet less than a required 60-foot right-of-way, which might just be an error in a survey or a stake location. Monticello Drive is a 60-foot right-of-way. The rest of the roadways around that neighborhood are also 60-foot right-of-ways. So I think there was some confusion about the width and how it looks, especially on this map, when you see it looks a little bit more narrow than Monticello, but it's actually the same right-of-way, 60-foot right-of-way. And I think there was also some confusion about who would maintain the stormwater, some really kind of site plan specific conversations about who would maintain the mail kiosk and stormwater, and that would all be maintained by the HOA.
So this would be a newly established HOA.
Yes, I would, you know, I want to, I'm sorry, to have it rezoned before I put out a declaration and record that at the registry. I mean, none of that would make sense prior to getting through this process, sir. And
Let me ask you, if you developed it as it's now allowed at 5 or 6 units, would you need an HOA for that size of community?
I'll probably put the declaration on there as well, but I wanted to make sure I had the subject properties, the number of lots correct.
But I don't think you would necessarily require it. You could sell this as 5 or 6 individual lots, zoned R30.
Right?
Good, that's a question.
Oh, I believe I could. I mean, I believe so. I would think that's a better question for Paul. The USPS has put in some stipulations where you cannot have, you know, just a normal mailbox. You have to have a kiosk. So that might be, I mean,
That's part of the HOA probably. There would still be, somebody would have to maintain that. There would be some sort of agreement between property owners or those kind of things. But those are more site-specific questions that would come up later on when we do full engineering plans. We're asking at this time more for a rezoning and not really tied to the really detailed site-specific details.
I have a question on open space. It's stated on the map that 0.4 acres, 7.7%. Where would the open space be?
That would be the stormwater area location.
It's
On
not
the
what I
upper
would
right corner.
consider usable open space.
No usable open space is required.
Leaving aside whether required or not, there wouldn't actually be any. The stormwater, you couldn't put a swing set there, a community, you know,
Just depending on the size, there might be some extra space around it to do a trail or something like that, but, no.
Its specific purpose would not be for, park or recreational area. And one thing, you had asked Alex what the Planning and Zoning Board had referenced in their denial. And it said, guiding principle 2, balancing conservation and growth. The plan calls for the balancing of the need to conserve land while allowing purposeful quality development in strategic locations. Rezoning plus or minus 5.19 acres of R30 to R15 conditional is inconsistent with implementation strategy 2.17 due to the change to higher density in the transition from R210 to R10. Again, the R210 is surrounded by chain link and a barbed wire fence, and the rest of the neighborhoods are all R10. Personally think it makes more sense to have it zoned as R15, but obviously whatever you all choose is what we'll go with, and regardless, I'm going to try to get this developed either way. And I'd like to state again that with this proposal, I'm giving them a bigger buffer than what it's currently.
Other questions, comments before we seek any public comments?
Yes, sir. If you don't mind.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Is there a way to zoom in to this general concept plan, possibly right over lot 8 a little bit? If it's not, that's okay, I'll narrate.
Oh, you're pointing to this, okay.
Yep.
Lot 8 over here.
Yep, no, I'm sorry, it's the one in the bottom left corner, maybe the front, if it's possible.
Go ahead.
And maybe I'm reading my lots wrong. Yeah, no, lot 8.
On the bottom left corner.
Yeah, the bottom left
Yeah,
corner,
yep.
the bottom left.
Yep.
And I can ask these questions if we can't zoom into it. It's just more for clarity.
There you go, that's
Everybody.
good, that's helpful.
Perfect, thank you. So I want to discuss your sewer system that you have. That seems to be, have a little bit of concerns with, and I think the planning board shows some concerns as well. So when we look at our general concept plan through the front yards of lot 8, lot 7, lot 6, we have multiple sewer lines running through them. Am I reading that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. So basically, lot 4 begins with one grinder pump scenario, runs the line all the way to where the county would connect. Lot 6 would join in, lot 7 would join in lot 8. All right, so lot 8 in their front yard are going to have 5 sewer lines running through it, which are going to be very, very close to really the building envelope to the front. Very possible hitting someone's front steps, right? Am I reading that wrong?
No, that's all within the front setback.
Okay.
So that's between the right-of-way and the front.
Right, but still on their property is
Still on the property,
okay.
yes, but outside of the buildable area.
Okay, so the reason I wanted to zoom in real quick is I use the term manifold, so where all of those lines kind of terminate into one to connect with the county sewer system. Who is going to own responsibility of that portion?
Those will be deeded to each lot.
And they'll have an easement.
And so there's multiple easements, so lot 8's going to have 5 easements through the front yard, right? Which, right, so if I was to live in this neighborhood, I would be responsible for my sewer line all the way to county connection. But when we see the connecting point here where they all terminate into one line together, and there's a shared line that, again, connecting to the county, who's going to own responsibility for that shared line?
I'm not sure which line are you talking about?
So you see where they all terminate and end?
Yep.
Okay, so then you see where they would all turn right and then connect into the county sewer system?
That would be county sewer line, running through the right-of-way?
Before they connect into the county sewer system, 5 lines have to all come together into one line to connect, because the county sewer system's only provide you one connecting point.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so they all have to, and it appears that it's going to be somewhere around 10 feet or 12 feet of lines, total guess. So that 10 feet or 12 foot of line, when they all come together and connect, who's going to own that? And be
That's a good
responsible for
question.
connecting?
That's a good question that we'll have to, once this is rezoned, or if it's rezoned, or once we do the full detailed engineering plans on this, that will be determined then.
Well, I propose that we kind of answer it tonight, because I think one of the responsibilities
It will
of
be-
us are to just make sure that we take a look to make sure that everything, that we have compatible sewer systems running through a new neighborhood.
Yeah, and Moore County Engineering, we did work with them on this layout, and they had no comments at the time. So.
Because we just don't know who's going to own that portion, because if I'm a homeowner, I want to pay, and I have to pay for my line that's running through my neighbor's yard,
Yep.
then I have to pay for any repairs, but I don't want to pay for that 10 or 12-foot portion. That's really everybody's coming together. So I think that's
Might
maybe
be
something to
part of
solve.
the HOA.
Okay. Have to be declared on the HOA that all 5 people that have their lines connecting right there would have to share a joint responsibility of the 10-foot section of pipe if or when there was an issue that arose down the road. And that would have to be clarified, as we stated, in a declaration with the HOA, making it very clear to the property owners, buildings there, that that's a possibility that you might run down the road, and you're all gonna have to be willing to chip in to make the repair on that 10-foot section.
Okay. So we just don't know. Thank you very much.
And presumably lots 1 through 3 would not. They're not involved there at all.
They are. Well, they're involved on their side.
Yeah. There was a line there through lot 1 connecting back, yeah.
Doug or Alec, this is a legislative hearing, not a quasi-judicial, correct?
Okay, other comments? No. All right, hearing none. If you can step back and we'll hear from public. Thank you.
Thank you.
For your effort. And, okay, if there's anybody from the public who would care to come forward and address this topic, please do so right now. We actually have an actual list. Oh, yes, from Sharon May. And before she speaks, I just want to mention that we did receive a letter from, to the council from a Mr. Peter Collins, who lives on Monticello Drive, expressing his concerns with this application. So go ahead, Ms. May.
Thank you. Before I begin my address and my comments, I do have information on how this 5.19 acres came into being.
Oh, okay. Please share, please share.
Yes, it appears that when the Country Club of North Carolina developed their property, there was an area of 4.85 acres that was left over after these adjoining 5 acres were developed. And it was landlocked, had no source of access. This was occurring about the same time that Pinehurst Incorporated were developing all the lots along Monticello. And there was a 60-foot wide strip adjoining the first lot there on Monticello that Pinehurst Incorporated conveyed to Country Club of North Carolina in order to create this 5.19 acre lot. That deed conveying that strip of land, I'll also point out, contained a restriction that said no portion of the right-of-way of the access road should be closer than 20 feet to that first lot fronting on Monticello. Now, this was done in 1979, and it's my understanding that after a period of about 30 years, restrictions will go away. And obviously, 30 years has passed. So that restriction went away. But that is basically how this lot came into being. And my assumption is that it probably was zoned R30 because the smaller areas of Country Club of North Carolina have that R30 zoning. And it was likely considered that this was a flag-shaped lot that possibly would be developed with a single-family home site that had access on a public road. So that's just a
Thank you for that bit of history.
Yes, yes. But I'll go ahead with my comments now. My name is Sharon May. My husband and I, we live at 720 Monticello Drive, and we believe that this requested rezoning is inappropriate because it does not reflect a true reasonable transition from the adjacent R10 zone lots along Monticello Drive and the R210 land of Country Club of North Carolina. I provided you all with handouts, and the first one shows a comparison of the areas of the proposed lots to the existing adjacent lots. Proposed lots 1, 2, and 3, which reflects site areas of just barely above the 15,000 square foot requirement if it were rezoned to R15. But in comparison, the adjacent sites along Monticello Drive as well as Nashua Court are all well above the minimum 10,000 square foot requirement of their R10 zoning. In fact, the average size of these 5 adjacent R10 lots is about 41% greater than the R15 requirements. And this is pretty much consistent throughout the immediate area. As you may note on the other handout, which is a tax map excerpt, that I have noted the size areas of lots along Monticello, the proposed lots, as well as showing the acreage lots in Country Club of North Carolina. The proposed lots 4 through 8 reflect site areas of about a half an acre, and these abut acreage sites of Country Club of North Carolina, which range from 5 to 6.5 acres. So I ask you, number one, is there anything wrong with the existing R30 zoning? No. This zoning has been in effect for decades, and the 5.19 acres can be developed as it is with no rezoning needed. Second, is there really a need in the immediate neighborhood for more small lot developments? No. Close to 450 new lots within 3 nearby developments have recently been approved. These include South Pinehurst Cottages, which is already developing and selling, as well as Trotter Hill and the Blake Village development nearby in Aberdeen. These reflect small lot developments supported with considerable green space. The requested rezoning of this 5.19 acre site offers nothing but smaller lots on a cul-de-sac with no sidewalks, no green space. Third item, traffic along Monticello Road is already an issue, as it's used as a cut-through between Route 5 and Morganton Road. What is this road going to look like in the next few years? So why approve a rezoning to allow more dense development than its current R30 with access directly off this road? And finally, is rezoning from R30 to R15 CD fair and equitable to the adjacent existing developments, and does it protect and provide any benefits to the neighborhood? I have to say absolutely not. Although lots along Monticello Drive are zoned R10, they align more closely with the R15 lot size requirements. Country Club North Carolina, typically 5+ acres. Thus, R30 is the only reasonable zoning between the existing developments to provide a smooth transition from the smaller lots to the larger lots. A rezoning to R15 CD would actually allow smaller lots than any adjacent developments. As indicated, Planning and Zoning unanimously rejected this rezoning request, indicating it was not consistent with the recommended land use for the area. We ask that you please concur with their decision, deny the request for conditional rezoning, and maintain the R30 which is in place. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would care to speak on this topic in the audience? No. We'll have you back in a second. Did anyone have any questions for Ms. May? No.
Just one on the history. So CCNC originally owned the land, They gave it back to Pinehurst, and then Pinehurst in 1979 gave it back to CCNC?
No, Pinehurst Incorporated conveyed the 60-foot strip to CCNC. And then they conveyed that to 4 family members who have owned it forever. The zoning, I think there was a fire back many years ago, which, because of the loss of the materials there, it's difficult to confirm the zoning, but it seems that the R30 zoning was created for this lot once the lot was assembled and could be an accessible lot. Prior to that time, it was landlocked.
So the only thing that was given by Pinehurst was the flag piece, the flagpole piece of the flag lot.
The 60-foot strip from Monticello down to about where the line with the Monticello Drive lots. Yeah, right about in there, that there.
Gotcha.
The remainder of that lot was about 4.85 acres, which was left over from Country Club of North Carolina development.
Anything else, John? Oh, okay. All righty. If Mr. Greenbacker, you wanted to come back?
As mentioned, yes, this was owned by CCNC, and there was a little tract there. But furthermore, the zoning that's currently there is already for R30. If this were a plan to just have a single-family home there, that doesn't really track with that idea. And if I just want to point out again, saying did the adjacent property owners get any benefit from this? I am almost doubling the setback lines for building a house to be sensitive to that. And while they're zoned R10 and they're more comparable to R15 sizes, this is moving to R15. So they're still very much in check with all of the adjacent properties.
Okay.
That's all I would say. Thank you.
All right. John, go ahead.
Alex, what is the setback requirement for R30?
I can pull that right here, sir, too.
The rear setbacks are the same, the front setback is slightly larger for R30.
Correct.
But, so it would not be a doubling of the R30 setback necessarily. Thank you.
We're still in a public hearing. Alex, do you have something you wanted to add, or?
No, I was coming up to answer the question.
Okay. Any other comments? I think we can leave the public hearing open while we discuss this now in case we need to call someone back. Is that all right? Okay.
Would you like for us to pull up the council options on the slide?
Sure.
Helpful.
I guess, one, I want to thank both the applicant and Ms. May and Peter Collins for all of you for drilling down extensively on this 5.19 acres of property. I had I was going to say the pleasure, but I experienced the public, the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. I was actually in attendance at that, as I often do, just to learn things. And so I saw the back and forth on that and saw how the sort of Planning and Zoning Board ended up coming to where they did on it. I honestly, as listening to it at the beginning of the discussion, I didn't think they were going to find much to debate. But as they asked themselves questions and as they heard from the neighbors, you could see the sort of shift in the attitudes of the Planning and Zoning Board members who were sitting up here. They were reluctant to change this designation, and the reason I asked the question earlier about the history of ever a P and Z unanimous decision being overturned by a council is because I consider that somewhat of a benchmark of the folks who really do this more full-time than we do, though we're fortunate to have Councilman Hooper here, who spent, I think, 6 years sitting through planning and zoning board meetings, as you can tell by his questions. I'm very reluctant to reverse the planning and zoning board's decision, and but I do want to hear any other thoughts from my fellow council members on this.
I guess my opinion is that the question, what's wrong with R30, is a valid question, which begs the next question, which is, how would this improve this development? With the absence of usable open space, with the amount of increased traffic provided for whatever goes in here, I think the answer is, it seems to me that R30 is still a reasonable approach.
Quick question for Alex, real quick.
Go ahead,
and then a
Jeremy.
statement. So Alex, if I'm not mistaken, tell me if I am, steps can encroach past the setback line. Am I dreaming that?
Building steps may.
Building steps can encroach past the front setback, can go into there. So in a way, they could interfere then with the easements, was my point there, in a way. Well, I just want to make sure we have a little clarity on the uniqueness of this utilities plan that they have. Because even if it stays R30, in fairness to the applicant, there's going to be something similar. There's still most likely, I would guess, use a grinder pump scenario. But the risk of adding more dense lots exacerbates some risk that I want to make sure that we're aware of. So number one is, these things don't work without power. Now, they work with battery backup, and they're fairly common in developments. But if we were to have a hurricane event that lasted 2 weeks, we could have a scenario with homes without septic pumps that are pumping. If I have an easement through my front yard, then I am reliant upon my neighbors maintaining their pumps and not misusing their pumps. So a lot of people love to take flushable wipes and flush these. They're not to be used in that manner. But if my neighbor does this consistently, then I very easily could have my front yard ripped up, possibly my steps. So that's just, I want us to understand that, one, it's going to happen either way, but with adding extra lots, it exacerbates the risk. And so that was just the point I wanted to just make, and to be fair to them, it's going to be there. That's the only option, because it doesn't run uphill, unfortunately. They got to get it there to wherever but if there's less easements, the density, of course, that's where a lot of the density comes in. So
That's
a
a
point.
challenge then, regardless
Yes.
of whether we
Yes,
do.
sir.
Okay. Mr. Taylor.
Alex, could you pull up the 8-lot map? Or the-
There you go.
And so Jeremy, to your point, hypothetically, if it were to be developed as R30, there would probably be 3 lots, maybe 4, along what looks like the south side, and 2 lots or 3 on the north side. But it would be fewer, it wouldn't be 5 sewer lines, it'd be 2 or 3.
Yes, sir, and I think that if we look a little closer, we can probably, it's notated somewhere where the county connection is, so they would have to pump the sewage to the county connection for that point to be a gravity, and it may be a force main fed scenario. So it's just a concern when we look at utility plants, and I don't want to get too specific, but I think we get the idea.
Well, it's good, because that was not brought up. I don't remember that being brought up in the planning and zoning board meeting at all, and so
I think it was brought up, but it just wasn't
wasn't drilled
expanded
down
as
on, yeah,
much,
it's sort of new information to me, okay. John?
And I am loath, absent a compelling reason, to override people who do this month in and month out And having sat on historic preservation, although those decisions don't come to council, it would have certainly been a negative if they were. I don't think economics is in our purview, but I'm not sure that I see that there are different lot sizes sell for different prices. As a developer, 6 times whatever an R30 lot will bring is maybe, so but I don't think that's in our purview. But I'm loath to override planning and zoning. I don't hear a compelling argument as to why we should do that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think if it was developed for 5 lots, I think they're probably, given the location of those particular lots in that piece of property, they would be prized for people who are looking for a single-family home in Pinehurst, that convenient to both the resort as well as to the area there along Blake Boulevard. Okay, well then, perhaps a motion,
I have a motion when you're ready.
please, Jeremy.
Fairly long, so please forgive me. I recall the day one rule of brevity. I'm sorry, I'm not breaking it.
Go right ahead.
Should be clear. I move to deny the requested zoning map amendment for approximately 5.19 acres of land located along Monticello Drive and further identified by parcel ID number 000019245, and find the requested amendment inconsistent with the Village of Pinehurst 2019 Comprehensive Plan due to the sewer infrastructure to the developments is not compatible with the increased density of the application versus the current R30 zoning. And the condition of no sidewalks contradicts village efforts to create a safe, walkable neighborhoods, as well as contradicts PDO Chapter 9.17.1.19. And thus, it is not consistent with our 2019 Comprehensive Plan Guiding Principles, number 2, balancing conservation and growth, number 3, places to live, number 4, moving around the village, transportation, mobility, and parking, and number 6, supporting infrastructure and utilities.
Before we ask for a second, do we need to move out of the public hearing to take this up, or can we take this up within the public hearing?
You can certainly take it up within the public hearing. The motion's been made within.
Okay.
One thing I didn't hear was a statement of reasonableness and in the best interest of the public with the motion.
Sorry, that was the last statement there.
Go ahead.
So to go back there, so the
Not
requested...
to make it any longer for you.
No, it's okay. The requested amendment is not considered reasonable and is not in the best interest of the public, and R30 is a more compatible zoning designation.
Okay, we have a motion,
Second.
and we have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
You opposed? Okay. Motion denied. Decision made. Thank you very much. Thank you both, everyone who presented and spoke, and I assume
I think
you'll go ahead and figure out another approach, but we wish you luck. Very professional presentation.
by the way, I move to adjourn the public hearing.
We have a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are out of the public hearing, and we are at regular business. And this, I'm hoping, is very brief. Oh, yes.
We're going to do the audit contract
We'll
first.
do the audit real quick. I'm assuming this is going to be a brief presentation?
Yes, I hope so.
Okay. Go ahead and describe for our listeners what we're going through right now.
Yes, so,
I'll get it for you, Dana.
thank you, Doug. So every year around this time, I bring to you the audit contract for the current fiscal year, so it would be the audit for the fiscal year 2026 that we're in currently. In the last several years, the audit costs have escalated significantly And so I decided to issue an RFP this year for audit services. I knew we could get a more competitive and better price while still receiving a high-quality audit. Given we are, in my mind, a relatively simple audit, we're very well prepared. We prepare our own financial statements, et cetera. We received 6 proposals. I narrowed those down to 3, primarily based on the cost or some other factors. All the firms that responded have the required licenses and a past peer review report, so they were all generally qualified based on those criteria. The firm that I'm recommending, Malden & Jenkins, is not the lowest cost. They were the second lowest cost. The initial fee for 2026 is $2,250 more than the low-cost proposal. And over the 3 years that were estimated in their proposals, it's about $7,000 more in total across the 3 years. But I do feel, for the reasons stated here in the bullet points, that additional $7,000 over 3 years would be well spent. This firm, I think the key differences really are that they are able to perform the audit both on-site and remotely, which is beneficial to us. That's our preference, given that we have a lot of paper-based records still. The ability of the team to come on site is more efficient for us. The low-cost auditor would be fully remote, and the staff would not be in North Carolina. So they are a more local firm. The office is in Raleigh, and Moore County and Southern Pines use them, as well as many other towns in North Carolina. All of the references that I spoke to had glowing recommendations for them. And their annual cost escalation, in their proposal, the FY27 and 28 audits are not binding in terms of these fees, but these are their estimates that help us to determine if they would have a kind of a reasonable increase from year to year, and it's $2,000 per year, which I think is very reasonable. Overall, the FY26 audit fee would be $40,000. That's $15,000 less than what we paid for last year's audit. So I'm very pleased with that. The only additional item is that fee does not include any federal or state single audit of grant funding. I do not anticipate that the village will be required to have either of those audits done. If it does become required, it would be approximately $5,000 to $8,000.
Where could that possibly turn up, this federal government single audit with us? Anywhere?
Honestly, it would take a huge grant. Even the SAFER grant, we would only end up spending, I think in the highest year, it would be about 300-some thousand.
Okay.
The SMPO has some federal grant funding, but maybe we're at 500,000 with those two combined.
Doesn't kick in.
Right, and it would, our PAL bill for the state funding is the most significant. That's about 700,000. So it would require an additional almost $300,000 spent from state funds to get us over that $1 million threshold. So those are unlikely. I'm not aware of any grants that would, put us over that limit.
Just to
or
clarify,
threshold.
one question. You're asking us to approve a 1-year contract with 2 years rollover or 2-year additions that would we take up those separately each year?
That's correct, yes. So
Thank you.
at this time, I'm only asking you to approve this year's contract. The intention is, if we have a good experience and the fee is fair, we intend to stay with the same auditor, but we are only committing to 1 year, and each subsequent year would be brought to you as it comes, yes.
Thank you. Do you have more to say, or we're going to ask my colleagues any questions?
Nope, that's all.
Questions?
Did 2 questions. First of all, I would expect there would be some additional staff time, which is primarily your time, because they're not familiar with us as an incumbent auditor would be. I assume you thought about that, and more importantly, what you must have at least had a conversation with our former auditors as to why they were not responding? Or is it a business model change, or?
I did not ask them why they didn't respond. I had heard from other, some of the references. I spoke to probably 15 different finance directors across the 3 firms that I was doing reference checks for. And several of them mentioned that the reason they changed was because they were previously with our incumbent auditor with Forvis Mazars, and they dropped them because they were kind of cutting back on their local government practice, and they did not have the staff to serve them. So it could have just been a matter of time until they would have cut us if we didn't choose to move on to another firm instead.
Change of business philosophy.
Yeah, kind of changing
Okay,
maybe
thank
the industries they're focusing in. Yes, where Malden and Jenkins, they are choosing to specialize in local governments. They do more local government audits across the United States than any other firm.
How big a firm are they, just in order to be able to do that?
Let me see
And are they a
quickly if I have-
subsidiary of someone else, or are they a freestanding?
No, they are their own independent firm. I don't know if I printed that page and have it handy in front of me. I can get that information for you if you'd like.
Just curious.
It's likely in their proposal.
Nothing further for me.
Okay, Jeremy?
No, sir, I'm good.
No? Okay. Well, I think it's a rather straightforward decision for us, so I'll entertain a motion and we can proceed.
I move to approve the fiscal year 2026 audit contract with Malden and Jenkins in the amount of $40,000 and authorize the mayor to execute the contract.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Now, at the beginning of our meeting, we amended our agenda to take up a discussion of the North Carolina Department of Transportation letter regarding the proposed redesign of the Pinehurst traffic circle. And so that's what we will begin doing. I have a few opening remarks, and then Councilman Taylor and Councilman Hooper have been working on this issue for several months now in the effort to find a reasonable and practical solution to address the issues we face with the traffic circle. So I'm just going to briefly go over a quick history, because we have a tendency, this has been going on quite a while, to forget what some of the water that's gone under the bridge, although much of the water seems to be continually flowing under the bridge, is very similar to previous water. But anyway, and I am the only member currently on the council who was here in June of 2022 when North Carolina Department of Transportation presented to the Village Council a solution entitled the Continuous Flow Intersection that they wanted the council to obviously support. In the previous years, no council, no mayor had ever supported any proposal that was discussed. But I think that this was a more serious effort. They had a well-respected consultant came in here and gave an incredible presentation. It was almost 2 hours. And by January of 2023, but certainly shortly after that, as a matter of fact, one of the council members at that time, when faced with the presentation and the visual of it, said it felt like a knife was being stuck in her heart. But by the end of the year, it was clear that there was no support on the council for what they were recommending, this CFI. And so we sent a letter telling them that, but also offering, as we have continually done, suggestions for improvements that can be made to the circle. So the then mayor and village manager sent that letter, and with about a dozen suggestions, and they contacted us back, and while they were disappointed with our thoughts on their overall plan. They took us up on 2 of our recommendations. The addition, someone mentioned it earlier today, the addition of the lane dividers that originated in this room at this, on this topic. And then the more clarifying signage, the words "only" on a lot of those, on those overhead signs that when people come into the circle, we're helping people know that if they went to this lane, they could only go to Aberdeen, or they could only go to Pinehurst, as opposed to having to start skipping and jumping lanes. But the lane dividers help prevent that also. So that went on. They adopted that in January 24 is when those actions were corrected. In April of 24, they came forward with another proposal, more, again, a thought-out one, and it was sort of related to the CFI, but it was entitled The Shifted Pillow. And it was going to be rather devastating to the circle and involved the use of eminent domain and some other factors. There were 3 public meetings that were held on this. There was a quite active engagement by our residents. 1,000 people or so showed up at the Pinehurst Elementary School, and there was no advocate within our community for that at all. And we waited till all those things were done, and then the council adopted a resolution unanimously to oppose the shifted pillow. But again, we offered some suggestions that we had offered in the past, and we specifically said we wanted to meet and figure out how we can improve this situation. And they said, listen, they recognized the public sentiment, and they said, listen, we're going to need more time to come up with another alternative. So the meeting didn't take place until we got into 2025. They came up with this newest proposal, which was definitely an improvement over the shifted pillow, but it still was, it was a little contradictory to what they'd been telling us before about where they saw traffic going, but it still took a little bit more of the circle than we were comfortable with, and there were still issues of property rights and eminent domain. So they had one public meeting this time at the Fair Barn. We waited till that was concluded. I think that was in October. And then we reviewed the comments from that. Well, 60% of the residents, of the people who showed up there, were not favorably disposed to it. And in that meantime, we had an election for the council again. And so we made a decision that we would designate our newest member, Jeremy Hooper, along with the mayor pro tem, to again engage with NCDOT on looking for a solution. In the summer of 25, both myself and John Taylor went up twice to meet with the engineers. So after we did all that, we waited, and in February 24th, we adopted another a resolution unanimously, again, in opposition to their proposal, but again offering an effort to continue the discussion and with some other suggestions that we got to be pretty specific in our resolution. And then John Taylor reached out pretty soon after that and arranged for a meeting for him and Jeremy. They already had one with the folks up there, but arranged to have another meeting on April 8th, and that's been in place for several weeks now. So, and then the other day, of course, there was this letter that was released saying that they were going to stick with their proposal and so forth, but they wanted to keep working with us and so on. So that brings us to where we are now. And while that was going on, sometime after, I'm going to say January, but actually it goes further back, members of the community were coming forward with some, I'll call them very serious grown-up suggestions of things that we would consider. And of course, they wanted us to try to convey that to NCDOT. And in the last 2 months, thereabouts, John and Jeremy and would be meeting with some of these residents, and they've come up with something that I think is significant. It's substantial and it's serious. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to John and Jeremy to walk through what we think is an alternative design for the traffic circle that is very sensible. So, Mayor Pro Tem Taylor, please.
Good. Thank you, Pat. Yeah, I don't, Shannon, you're going to have to step us through, or Doug, I don't know.
I can do it.
Okay, so, you know, when you talk to the DOT about pretty much any project that they get themselves involved in, they will tell you that, you know, their engineers study it, and they think about as many things as they can think of, and they come up with the best solution. And that's probably typical of engineers in almost any discipline. They don't give you a Chinese menu, one from column A and two from column B. They say, here it is. And so the presentation on the shifted pillow CFI was thought to be the best option that they could come up with. And that's from an engineering standpoint, and they will admit to you they give virtually zero consideration to anything involving aesthetics. They're engineers, they have numbers, they have data, they have models, and here's the answer. So by definition, if we're not going to do the CFI, what we're looking for is what's the next best solution to that. Clearly, there are continuing forecasts of growth in Moore County. Whatever many people describe the traffic that we experience today as not objectionable because they've moved here from pick a large city anywhere in the country, and they say people don't understand. I'd take the worst of the traffic circle over Charlotte, New York, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, you name a city. So that's what we're really looking for here. And the forecast that they made in leading to the shifted pillow CFI was that in 2050, there'll be 80,000 vehicles a day going through the circle. And we'll come back to how they got to that number, and I have some questions about that number. But that was really the culmination of at least 20 years of study and almost 20 different designs that they've looked at. And 2 years ago, they were saying that was the final plan, but of course, that didn't actually happen. So tonight, I want us to take a look at an alternative that they actually proposed and studied 2 years ago. It actually, from my standpoint, was the second best plan. And so part of the question is why not that plan? Why suddenly now this new thing? So Doug, the next slide. So as Pat went through and is supplementing that, in February of 2023, the DOT actually did a traffic count. They put the little tubes out in the roads. They counted actual traffic. And they said in February 2023, they had roughly 50,000 trips a day. In July of 2023, they actually did some separate analysis, taking a look at the actual speed at which cars traveled in the circle and what they called the entry and travel gaps. How close was one vehicle to another? In 2024, their consultants, HNTB, released this 431-page traffic analysis technical memorandum using these two things as their baseline. However, one thing they did, and this was I believe at least the fourth iteration of this that HNTB had done, going back as far as at least 2017, and they recommended, again, the shifted pillow. The second best solution they had, which they called Concept 14, was the flyover with turbo hybrid. And turbo hybrid is actually a generic term. They didn't, NCDOT didn't invent that. And there's a very interesting video that was sent around by a member of the public and that talks about that. But by definition, a turbo hybrid circle has two travel lanes in it. The interesting thing is that the Pinehurst traffic circle had two travel lanes in it until sometime in the very early 90s, 91, 2, 3, and I haven't been able to unearth why they took that lane out, but they did, and that's the lane that most of us know today. Doug, the next slide, please. So in the traffic analysis technical memorandum, I recommend it highly if you have insomnia, but I actually have gone through it at some depth. And it is very detailed, but there are a number of omissions and some internal inconsistencies, and I've just pointed out a couple of these here. First is, they didn't actually test 2 lanes coming into the circle and 2 lanes traveling. They tested 2 lanes coming in and 1 travel lane. They tested 1 lane and 2 travel lane, one entry lane and 2 travel, but they didn't do 2 and 2. No explanation as to why not. Secondly, they also talked about how the flyover, this was what they called Concept 14. They were going to connect 211 to 15501 south of the circle with a bridge up in the air, a typical urban flyover interchange. However, it was interesting because they said that one of the legs of the circle, which is a major beneficiary of that, namely 15501 south of the circle, they didn't include the travel time test or comparison to that, with no explanation as to why not. And it's kind of strange from my standpoint that engineers would say, well, this is the main beneficiary, but we didn't study that. And there are also some inconsistencies, as it says here on page 14. In one place, they say that this Concept 14 was consistently outperformed another alternative, Concept 18, and then later they say that Concept 14 didn't outperform Concept 18. Concept 18 actually connected 15501 both sides of the circle, again with 2 aerial bridges. Next slide, Doug. And there's some other analytical issues. One is, if to go from 50,000 to 80,000 vehicles in 27 years, that's from 2023 to 2050, you have to grow a little over 1.75% every year. However, they did elsewhere in the document, they actually made growth projections for each of the 5 roads entering the circle, and those growth projections were all between 1.1 and 1.5%. And I don't have any particular argument with that. That is comparable to the long-term growth rate in population in Moore County. And the traffic circle, as we call it, the Pinehurst traffic circle, but it really is a regional, a part of the regional transportation network. I don't know how you get to 1.75 if the individual roads are all going to grow between 1.1 and 1.5. You don't need multivariable calculus to say that, that's going to be difficult. They also, as I said earlier, there were several combinations that I would have thought they would study, but they didn't. And all of this, since this was 2 years ago, predated the reduction in population growth, which the state demographer came out with in January of this year. Moore County previously had been forecast to grow at almost 2%. I thought that was unlikely on its face, but that's been reduced down to 1.2. And the adjacent counties, which were never going to grow at that rate, have also come down. Next slide. So the public reaction, to say the least, was there was overwhelming pushback against the continuous flow CFI, or the shifted pillow CFI. All 3 garden clubs, the pilot newspaper wrote 3 separate editorials. And in one of them, the one they wrote on August 6th, they mused, maybe less efficient, maybe what we're looking for here is a solution that is less efficient than the CFI, which was the definition of ideal for the DOT. So in any event, they abandoned the CFI. They said they would come up with a new recommendation by the 4th quarter of 2024. That didn't quite happen. I think they actually was almost May or June before they came out with the current presentation. They also said that the DOT was in the process of updating the county's transportation demand model. The DOT maintains a transportation demand model for separately for all 100 counties in North Carolina. That was also supposed to be done by the 4th quarter. They didn't quite make that. It was really only completed late in the 1st quarter of really this year, for a variety of reasons. I also wrote an op-ed in the pilot back in October of 24, questioning some of these underlying assumptions, just on the simple math of it, not because I'm a traffic engineer, which I am not. And the interesting thing is, if you go to the DOT website and you look under, About Us, there's a goals and values. And they don't say that these goals and values are listed in priority order. But it was interesting that under both the number one goal and the number one value, I had to do with safety. They're very much in the business of promoting solutions that enhance safety. I won't read the rest of the points here. They're pretty self-evident. I'm interested that they talk about transparency and data-driven decisions, and also promoting the use of new and better solutions. So that's always a good thing, to be thinking about what else might happen. Doug? And when you ask them specifically, what were they trying to do when they proposed either the CFI or anything else? What is their goal for the traffic circle? And they'll tell you two things. They'll always tell you improve safety, but they'll also tell you we want to improve what they call the level of service rating. And a level of service rating has to do with the expected delay at peak times. The interesting thing, so that all makes sense. On safety, it's just separately, when they redid this study in 2024, they expanded the area that they looked at, as you can see here. They used to just look at the circle itself and out to about a quarter of a mile or a third of a mile, something like that. But now they've expanded it out to include at least the closest intersection to the circle, which, if you think about going down 15501 to the south, would be, I think, the entrance to the high school. And when they talked about crash data, which one of the reasons that they thought that the CFI would be better was the increase in crashes, but that was not crash data just in the circle. That was in the vicinity of the circle. And when they finally did their public meeting back in October of last year, they actually admitted that there were only 124 actual crashes in the circle itself. And that's very similar to the numbers that we have generated here in Pinehurst, because their source for that data are our local police reports. If you get in an accident in the traffic circle and you call the Pinehurst Police Department, they write something up. They talk about the nature of the accident, what have you, and that in turn gets fed to the state DOT, and that's where those numbers come from. And as it says here, we actually, when you look at those numbers, we peaked at 121 or 122 crashes in the circle itself. I get as all council members do, I get the police report every morning, and you'll see an accident at Page Road and 211. Well, the DOT will count that as an accident in the vicinity of the circle, and it's impossible that it has to do with that, but it's also possible that someone's going up Page Road to go to the hospital and has nothing to do with the circle. Anyway, next slide, Doug. So here are the actual definitions for level of service. And the thing that I found really surprising when I first looked at this is how little difference there is between an A and a B and a C. And I would argue that between A and E, virtually no resident that I talk to in Pinehurst believes this is significant. Whether you have to wait 10 seconds or 40 seconds, no one is really very worked up about that. When you get to a level of service F and it just says greater than, well, obviously it makes a difference whether it's 60 seconds or 10 minutes. But that's the only category. These are the categories that they have. And it is trying to improve this level of service consistent with some statement on safety that is the ultimate goal. So what did they actually say 2 years ago when they compared the shifted pillow CFI to the flyover, which is what they called it at the time? So this is Table 5 from this 431-page report, and I've circled the two numbers that I think most non-traffic engineers would find most relevant. On the left-hand column, you have the average morning peak hour and afternoon peak hour delays. And in the morning, you can see that the difference is a little over 100 seconds, a minute and a half. In the afternoon, it's 36 seconds. And that, to me, would be something that I think most people would regard as irrelevant or certainly trivial. And in the right-hand column, the numbers that I've circled are the total number of vehicles that they say arrived in the circle. And again, there's very little difference. By the way, this is their projection for 2050. This is not today. They look at all these things, but this is their 2050 projection. So they're basically saying that with the CFI, they can handle 14,500 vehicles a day, and with the flyover, it's a mere 14,000. It's about 400 and some less, or less than 3% difference 24 years from now.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, the 30 seconds you were talking about, where is that? Is that on the afternoon between the
lower
shifted
left-
pillow and the hybrid?
Yes, the lower left circle, 87 seconds
That one.
for the turbo hybrid and 51 for the shifted pillow.
Got it.
So 36-second difference in 2050. So a little background on this Concept 14. First of all, anyone who's spent much time driving there, and particularly observing backups during rush hour, would come to the conclusion, and they'd be correct, that 211 and 15501 south of the circle carry more traffic than any of the other roads. Versions of the flyover have existed. They weren't always flyovers, but they really go back as far as concepts 1 and 3 in different iterations. What was different, and this is in part, I believe, was some input from a member of the public who spoke earlier, was creating an express lane. Why not take the 2 lanes with the most traffic and find a way to have them go from 8, if you're coming north up 15501 and you want to go west out 211, where you don't even go into the circle. But do it in a way that's aesthetically more pleasing than having a bridge go up in the air. So that was sort of some of the history behind it. And off this, you can then add various additional options, such as what about adding a second travel lane in addition to doing this? Doug? So 2 residents, one of whom was substantial graphic arts capability, the other was substantial engineering capability, came up with this as an idea. And this basically is Concept 14, but rather than going up in the air, we're going to go down 1 level. I will say, interestingly, as when I was a candidate for council back in the summer of 2023, I actually, not knowing a lot about the CFI at the time, I asked members of the DOT whether this had ever been considered, and the reason that I talked about it was in Detroit, which is where I grew up, and in Los Angeles, a city in which I've spent a lot of time, and several other cities, most of the expressway traffic in the downtown area takes place 1 level below street level traffic. And that's because traffic that's moving, very rapidly, you want to separate that from 25, 30 mile an hour street level traffic. So this is hardly a new idea. This isn't something for which I'm going to get, the Nobel Prize in engineering. So this is north is up here, 15501 both ways, going north and south, Midland Road going east and west. I will say that this diagram does explain one thing to me. When I first saw the current design, I wondered who in the world wants to connect 211 to Midland Road. And I would have said that they don't really align very well, but you can see from this, they actually do align pretty well. So that alignment was maybe not such a crazy idea, but my question to that would be, do we really want to be directing more traffic out Midland Road? Is it the way traffic wants to go now? And the answer does not appear to be yes. And even if it were, do we want to take a bunch of 45 mile an hour traffic, which as was mentioned in public comments is really closer to 55 mile an hour traffic, and send it out Midland Road? So here, what you're going to be doing here is starting 300 to 400 feet away from the traffic circle, you're going to add 1 additional lane. The far left lane of the 3 will be the express lane. If you're coming down 211, the only place you can go on that is 15501 south, and conversely, if you're coming north up 15501, the only way you can go is 211 west. The other 2 travel lanes will function exactly as they do today. 1 lane will be a slip lane. It will be an express exit to the next available road, and the middle lane will be for all other points of departure, all other exit points. I would also mention, if we can shrink this down just a little bit, on the right-hand side is actually a diagram of how you might want to change the existing geometry of how roads arrive at the circle and create a better point of entry. If we think of a traditional four-way intersection, all the entry angles are 90 degrees. Right now, for a number of the traffics, it is 30 degrees, which means if you're stopped there, if you have to come to a stop, you have to look way back over your shoulder to see who's coming around. If you realign that from 30 degrees to 70 degrees, you get a much safer way to enter. And probably, I would have to guess, somewhat reduced gaps, a shorter distance that allows you to move into the circle if you're stopped there. So I wanted to point that out. That's the sort of enhancement that could be made in parallel with this, or could even be re-engineered certainly before 2031.
John?
Yeah.
Can I add something as well? So in the 431-page document that was provided, some of that data of which spoke had the most rear-end accidents was provided, and there's varying degrees of entry of each of these spokes, which you're aware of, and those who are closer to 70, it was noticeable that they had least rear-end accidents as well, if I remember right correctly.
Yes, if you connected the travel data with the accident data,
Yes.
I believe that's correct.
Yes.
Yes.
We look at the ones who have closer to a 70-degree entry versus the 40.
I actually included what they call the origin destination data as an appendix here. We may or may not get that later. So next slide, please, Doug. So again, concept 14 in the 431-page document had an aerial bridge going up in the air. I don't think a lot of people like that aesthetically. So the tweaks to the flyover would be to replace an above-grade bridge with a trench, not a tunnel. My preference would be that be for cars only. I'm just going to make that statement. If it's cars only, you don't have to go down as far. You don't need to provide it'll be a little bit easier from an engineering standpoint. The non-express approaches, realign those, as we mentioned, to get as close as you can. You may not get all the way to 70 degrees, but if you went from 30 to 50 or 30 to 60, it would still be a significant improvement. And then also the possibility, which was not fully studied, of reintroducing a second travel lane. That's a typo on my part. That should be lane, not land. A second travel lane in the circle. I did discuss that idea with one of the consultants who does a lot of this modeling to the DOT, and he kind of said, you know, that's crazy. People aren't used to that. People are definitely not used to a continuous flow intersection. They're not used to having to turn left large distances away from the actual intersection where they're going to go left. There are a lot more people, I think, who have traveled in Europe, possibly have lived in Europe, and who are actually very familiar with most European circles, and many also in the United States that have two travel lanes in them. So along those lines, I've thought that we ought to retitle Concept 14 from flyover to express. But the idea is in part to get rid of the idea of a bridge. Doug? What do I think the main benefits of the express concept would be? First of all, it would maintain much more of the look and feel. As you are approaching from any of the 5 roads, what you saw visually would be very much the same. There's no bridge superstructure going up in the air. Secondly, I think we would be able to preserve at least 80%, and that number may be low, of the existing trees. You're going to have to shave some off in that corner. We're going to lose some without any question. But I don't think it would be much, and I think it would be less than the current DOT proposal. Secondly, the current DOT proposal linking 211 to Midland Road requires that you add 2 lanes to both of those in each direction. This only adds 1, and again, you're only adding 1 to 15501 and 211. That means you need much less land. I believe it is possible, I can't be 100% certain of this, but I believe it is possible that there would be no eminent domain condemnation. And because a lot of the actual construction would take place on the inside of the circle, in theory, you could begin that tomorrow. They don't need to obtain right-of-way there. The state owns that land, so that they could certainly start well in advance of 2031. And therefore, there would be much less disruption during the actual construction phase. And secondly, as was pointed out to me, the express lanes, the capacity of the express lanes today would be equal to 50% of the projected traffic in 2050. They can handle about 6,000 vehicles, 3,000 each way, compared to that, again, that 14,000, which is the projection for 2050. How does the express concept compare to the current proposal? Well, I don't know. In January, when Jeremy and I met with the DOT, I asked that they, if you think back to the earlier slide, the table 5 had a whole bunch of numbers on it. I asked for them to, could they give me the results, the evaluation, performance evaluation for this new design in line with table 5. And when we reached out to them again, originally I was hoping that we would have met with them last week. For some reasons we'll get to in a minute, they said no, April 8th. I again asked whether we could get those numbers, and I still don't have them. But I think it would be important to say, how good do they say that is? What's the average expected wait time, so forth and so on? And can we compare that to either the CFI on one hand or to the express concept? So one of the reasons that they wanted to, the DOT wanted to postpone the meeting till April 8th was they have a new traffic study scheduled for release in about 10 days, a little less than 10 days. They said the first week of April. And obviously I've asked for that in advance of our meeting. So I don't have table 5 performance data for the new strategy. I'll be very interested to look at that. I'll be very interested to see whether they have changed the projected volume from 80,000 vehicles a day. Certainly given the substantial reduction in population, Moore County population is now estimated 21% less than it was 2 years ago. And 4 of the 9 counties that abut Moore County are projected to actually have lost population between now and 2050. And all of them are projected to grow less rapidly than was previously projected. So it's hard for me to understand how you would still come up to 80,000, but I don't know. We'll have to see what that number is. Secondly, the current proposal adds, as those of you who either came to the public meeting or have seen it elsewhere, there are going to be some 2-lane left turns with signalized traffic lights. You're going to be turning left across potentially oncoming traffic. And of course, they'll probably, if I had to guess, you'll get a green arrow and they'll say, well, that's a red coming the other way. But people do run red lights. People get distracted. People are in a hurry or whatever. That proposal seems, to my mind, to fly in the face of their much described interest in safety. It has to increase the potential for high-impact collisions. There have been multiple reports written not only by the North Carolina DOT, but many other states and the Federal Highway Commission that say that those sorts of things are inherently more dangerous, more likely for severe accidents. So where are we now? DOT has said publicly and multiple times that they would like to have public support for whatever they do. Jeremy pointed out earlier that when they were talking about the shifted pillow CFI, they actually did 3 separate public meetings. They did one here in Pinehurst, one in Aberdeen, and one in Carthage. They've only done one for this design. They did it here in the Fair Barn. 60% of the comments that they submitted, that they received, were in opposition to that design. So against about 15% that were positive. I would say they have not demonstrated that they have public support for this. The DOT wrote a letter to the council indicating a desire to continue to partner with Pinehurst and to work with the village to preserve the visual character, minimize impact, blah, blah, blah. Jeremy and I have a meeting scheduled on April the 8th. We want to discuss this express design, the slight modification from something that they've already studied, as well as to, again, put forth the interim improvements, which we think they could make separate and apart from whatever design they ultimately adopt. Additional bollards, better signage, changes in speed limits, and so forth. Doug? So, in conclusion here, there's no question that the DOT engineers have access to both data and models that we don't have, and we're not prepared to argue with their data, or we'd like to see what they are, but it's not because we have better or different numbers. I do think you always want to use the most current and accurate data you have. I'd love to see an evaluation of the express solution against the current proposal, and let's add back in those things that they didn't study last time that seem to be particularly germane. Let's look at travel times on 15501 south of the Circle. It's one of the two busiest roads that feed the Circle. I don't know how you can come to a theoretical answer without at least understanding that. Let's stack these up side by side, and we'll see what we have to say as a council and see what the public has to say. Happy to answer any questions if I can. Oh, I'll just show one more, the appendix. So part of the reason it's 431 pages is because for each of the, or for many of the factors they looked at, they had both what was the current state of play in 2023, they did a short-term projection to 2029 and a 2050 projection. This is what they call the origin and destination data. So across the top are the 5 roads, and that is where is traffic coming inbound. And then on down the column, or down the rows, is where's the traffic going out. So just looking at one number, in the morning peak hour, there were 31 cars coming down 15501 from north of the Circle that then left to go out to 11. And when you add those up, when you add up all the pairs to the right, not surprisingly, the boxes that are highlighted in green, that's 15501 south of the Circle and 211. In the morning peak hour, it carries 20% of the traffic. In the afternoon, it's a little higher, 23%. The total for both of them together is 21%. This is their projections or was their projections in 2050. And as you can see in the yellow box, that's 27% higher than any other pair of roads, or than the second most, and even higher than any other person. So they've looked at this 6 ways from Sunday, and to the extent that I can, so have I. And I firmly believe that not only would the public be willing to support the express concept, but that is more than that it was an acceptable solution relative to the forecast they had 2 years ago, and I think might become only more so based on what I'm guessing new projections will be.
John, that was excellent. Thank you for all that detail. And I know a lot of work went into that. And I also thank the residents that you've worked with over these past couple of months who've helped really focus attention on a sensible alternative. Jeremy, I want to hear some of your thoughts. You've been engaged in a lot of these meetings, and what's your observations?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to give some thoughts. In no way will I take any kudos from John or say I contributed. Really, it was me catching up in a lot of ways, but I'll point out a couple things. So just first, some of the crash data that John pointed out that they were measuring beyond the Circle, that also includes Airport Road and Midland, which would have a positive effect with that small circle to begin with as well, if I'm not mistaken. So that's something for us to consider. But I think more importantly, this thing is showing, just to address some of the misconceptions in Pinehurst, that we're automatically saying no for the sake of saying no, and that we're slowing down for the sake of slowing down. John didn't do all of this last week after. So this is years worth of effort on his behalf, along with a lot of subject matter experts from our community. This shows really, in my eyes, Pinehurst's commitment to not only a safe and aesthetically appropriate design, but also one that meets the efficient needs of what the DOT is looking for. John's made sure that he is able, as well as other subject matter experts in our community, they're able to talk the language. They've made the effort to understand what is needed for our community. And, I'll just go into the public support for this designs. So a point that I made to the county commissioners is this is very much important beyond Pinehurst borders. There is no doubt about it, and that's one of the reasons we're taking this so seriously. And pointing out that the CFI had 3 listening sessions from the public. Currently, this design, only in Pinehurst have we had the opportunity to give feedback. There really has been not a lot of effort for county residents to give the effort. No feedback or no listening sessions. Our county commissioners are great, but there was no public hearing that was performed before their decision to support the design. There was a work session, but there was no agenda provided nor for public understanding of it beforehand. So they had a work session, but it was kind of blind to what it was going to be about until after it was over. So I do agree that the DOT wants some public support for this, but I'm not sure that they have adequately asked for it. And hopefully the design and the data that John's proposing will kind of restart that conversation and see really what the public support's about. So.
Thank you. And as we know, the proposal that they put forward is not, construction is not going to begin to 2031. So we've got a little time here, and not that long, but we've got a little time in the immediate horizon to fully flush out possible alternatives that are serious alternatives, not blue sky ones. Barb, any thoughts from you?
No, other than thank you for putting all of this together. It's extraordinary. And I think the design is spot on based on where we are today and our projections and so forth. And I'm anxious to know how we can help you get this to DOT and to our community.
Obviously their meeting is going to be April 8th, and we'll discuss this again before we, as I'm sure we will, and we'll certainly share it with a lot of our residents that may not have been familiar with it. I had just a couple of things I wanted to point out, and one's a question. John, what is the percentage, your estimate of the percentage of traffic that would be removed from the circle by putting in place the express lanes? So in other words, how much less traffic goes around that circle if these express lane was put in?
Well, it's Doug, if you put up the appendix slide, please. It's 23%, was their projection.
Their projection.
So, yeah, if you think about if I'm not coming down 211 to go south on 15501, if I'm not coming up 15501 to go west on 211, there's going to be 20-some% less circulating in my way, if you will, from where I'm entering the circle to where I'm leaving the circle. And that has to improve my experience there.
I think Table 5 also kind of addresses that too.
Yeah.
Which one is that? Oh.
This one, I mean, if you look at like the total number of stops, you're going from 164,000 to 78,000.
Oh, yeah.
And
oh, yeah, I didn't
have to
notice that
confess,
number.
I'm not entirely sure I know what that number
What that means, yeah.
And I'm quite certain that 99% of the people of the public who turned up at the meeting at the Fair Barn don't know what it means. I think they know what the average wait time is. That number has to come down.
Right. The other thing, I think it was in a slide you didn't mention, and that is, it goes to this safety issue that in the 70-year history of the circle, there's never been a fatality. It's not because we're all great drivers here. It's simply because it's very difficult. First of all, accidents are somewhat limited in a circle as opposed to left-hand turns. But if you have fewer accidents, there's less likely that you're going to have a fatality. And particularly when you have no left turn, you're going right. So I think that's an interesting statistic. I also think it's worth noting that, as John referenced the NCDOT and other sources about the use of circles, that in Pinehurst alone, or in our area here, just in the last, I don't know, half a dozen years, maybe longer, there have been 3 circles added. One was in front of they're small. One was in front of the resort. Okay, it was going to be a traffic light, and it was an intersection. The second was down at Midland Road and Route 22, right past Pine Needles and Mid Pines. That was always sort of a little juggernaut there. And that circle that's been in there, people are using it, and it seems to be functioning pretty well. And if you go to the airport now, at the airport, there's that circle that seems to be, obviously, it's newer, but it keeps traffic flowing. There's no lights, and again, there's no left-hand turns. So I think that contributes to things. And to the NCDOT's credit, they are proposing another circle at the intersection of Airport Road and Midland Road, which is, I believe, a dangerous intersection. And I've seen accidents there. I don't know anything about fatalities, but so circles are more, people are more familiar, and the statistics about the accidents and fatalities around them are dramatically different than what they are for your standard traffic light intersection.
Both you and Jeremy mentioned the Midland Road and Airport Road, and I deliberately left that out because we already expressed support for that idea in the resolution
It's
we
absolutely,
adopted.
we're very supportive of that.
And it's not to suggest that, I mean, that intersection is relatively close to
It is.
the circle itself, and there has to be some interplay
And
between
in
the
the
two.
earlier CFI proposals, there was no circle put there. It was new, and it's a good new idea. And just like the right turn in and right turn out only for Beaver Lane's entrance. Because right now, you can technically come out of Beaver Lane and make a left-hand turn across the medium.
I see people trying to finesse the circle by making a U-turn there. That's marked no U-turn, but people
Yeah.
coming out of Beaver Lane can legally turn left there.
So both those suggestions, I think, are good suggestions, and we have expressed support of them to NCDOT in our resolution. What you've outlined tonight, I'm trying to capsulize it in sort of a sentence as you juxtapose it versus the most recent NCDOT proposal. What you've suggested will save more trees. It's going to reduces the use of eminent domain, which I thought was always interfering with the property rights of some of our longtime homeowners. It eliminates the need for traffic lights, and it preserves the geometry of the historic Pinehurst traffic circle while increasing efficiency. Now, to NCDOT's credit, this proposal they have forward is much better than their previous ones regarding trying to maintain some of the traffic circle's geometry. It's just that they've introduced this idea of traffic lights in intersections where we don't need to do them, I think, is the conclusion some of us have reached, and has been backed up now by a lot of thorough work from John and Jeremy and many of our residents. So I really appreciate what everyone's done, and we'll be certainly discussing this with our residents. And that concludes my remarks. If anybody has any other comments, I really think this is the right mix of data, safety, efficiency, and history in what you've put together.
And one of the, part of my remarks to the county commissioners was that I thought it's an inaccurate perception that the ultimate goal of Pinehurst generally is to prevent any changes whatsoever to the circle. I think it is fairer to say that there's a strong desire to maintain both safety and the aesthetics of the circle while improving the efficiency.
In all our resolutions and in almost every debate we've had, we have always used the phrase, we want to improve the circle, not destroy it. And there may be some people out there who are adamantly don't touch a leaf, but that is not the realistic approach that I think we've taken over the last several years. So I thank you.
I want to add into that, just real quick on that point, is that the CFI scared everybody so much that I think that got miscued through that process as well.
Good point. Okay. That brings us to the end of the regular session, and I'll entertain a quick motion to adjourn, and then we'll reconvene in 5 minutes for the work session. Is that okay?
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
Second.
Okay. Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Adopted. Thank you very much.
Really well done.